I still remember the exact sound my father made when I told him. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was laughter, a short, sharp bark of a laugh, the kind that comes out before a person even decides to be cruel. Like cruelty was just his first language, so fluent he didn't need to think before speaking it. I was 16 years old. It was a Tuesday in October of 2003, and the kitchen smelled like my mother's jollof rice and something quietly dying between us. I had waited all week to say it. I had rehearsed it in front of my bathroom mirror. I had even written it down in my notebook as if the right words might protect me. I want to be a doctor. 5 words. And my father, Cornelius Adeyemi, a man who pressed his shirts even on weekends, who quoted proverbs like scripture, who had an opinion about everything and everyone. He laughed. Then he looked at my mother, Rosaline, and she made that sound she always made. Not a laugh exactly, more like a breath that had given up, a sound that meant, I agree with him and I'm too tired to pretend otherwise. "Doctor," my father said, picking up his fork. "Okay, and who is going to pay for this doctor dream? You? With what?" My name is Adaeze Adeyemi. I was born second in a family that only ever celebrated firsts. My brother Emeka was older by 3 years, taller by 4 inches, and beloved in a way I spent most of my childhood trying to understand. He was going to study engineering, my father said, as if he were announcing a coronation. He was going to carry the family name, somewhere worth carrying it. I was going to get married well. That was the plan my parents had for me, spoken aloud or not. A girl who studied too hard became intimidating. A girl who became a doctor became a problem. "Medicine is for people who have connections," my father said that night, finally looking at me. "Do we have connections? Do you know what medical school costs in this country? Do you know the kind of people who become doctors?" "I could get a scholarship," I said. My voice was smaller than I wanted it to be. Emeka laughed then too. He was 19 and home from his first semester of university, wearing confidence like a new coat. "Adaeze, be serious," he said, not unkindly, which was almost worse. He genuinely didn't think I was capable. It wasn't even malice. It was pity. "You're smart, but medicine is different. You have to be exceptional." The word landed like a slap. "You're smart, but—" I looked at my plate. I didn't cry because I had learned a long time ago that crying at that table only gave my father something to point at. Too emotional, too sensitive. That's why she can't handle hard things. So I pressed everything down into a small, hard place in the center of my chest, the way I always did, and I nodded like I was considering what they said. I wasn't considering it. I was deciding. There is something that happens to certain people when they are told they cannot do something. For some, the doubt seeps in and does its work quietly, like water finding cracks. But for others, and I didn't know yet which kind I was, the doubt lands differently. It becomes fuel. It becomes the engine of something long and slow and inevitable. That night, I went upstairs to the room I shared with no one because Emeka had the bigger room, and I opened my biology textbook. I had already read the chapter twice. I read it a third time. I made notes in the margins in red pen. I didn't know yet about the MCAT or clinical rotations, or the brutal arithmetic of medical school admissions. I didn't know about residency hours or the specific exhaustion that lives inside a hospital at 3 a.m. I only knew one thing with complete certainty. I was going to become a doctor, and I was going to do it without a single dollar from Cornelius Adeyemi. Looking back now, what strikes me most about that dinner isn't the cruelty. I've had years to process the cruelty. What strikes me is how small the room felt, and how certain everyone in it was about the shape of my future except me. My father was certain. My brother was certain. My mother, silent in her corner, was certain in the way that only women who have sacrificed their own certainties for the comfort of men can be certain. They had already written my story. I just hadn't read it yet. I want you to stay with me here because what I'm about to tell you is not a clean story. It is not a simple story about a girl who proved everyone wrong and got a standing ovation at the end. Real life doesn't work that way. Real life is messier. The vindication comes at a cost you don't expect. The people you want to apologize don't always apologize in the right ways. And sometimes, the moment you've imagined your whole life looks nothing like you thought it would, but it's still yours. That's what I had to learn. That October night in 2003, with rice going cold on my plate and my father's laughter still ringing in the kitchen air, I made a decision that would take me 11 years to fully keep. 11 years of studying, of working, of being told in 100 different ways by 100 different people that I had aimed too high, wanted too much, forgotten my place. 11 years. And then my father called me from a hospital bed. The thing about being underestimated by your own family is that it teaches you a specific kind of resourcefulness. By my junior year of high school, I had discovered that the school library closed at 4, the public library closed at 6, and the stairwell on the 3rd floor of our building, the one that nobody used because the elevator had been fixed 2 years ago, had fluorescent lighting that buzzed but stayed on all night. I studied in that stairwell 3 times a week. I told my mother I was at a friend's house. I don't think she asked hard enough to know I was lying. I want you to understand the landscape of my world in 2004 and 2005. My father worked in insurance, adjusting claims with a precision he never applied to his children. My mother cleaned houses 3 days a week for families across town and spent the rest of her time maintaining a home that was supposed to reflect well on my father. Emeka was at university studying electrical engineering, sending home occasional calls that made my father stand up straighter when he answered them. And I was here, in the gap between the life my parents wanted and the life I was quietly, stubbornly building. My biology teacher was a woman named Mrs. Okonkwo. She was 53 years old, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and had a habit of calling on students who looked like they were hiding something. She called on me in September of my junior year when I gave an answer about cellular respiration that was 3 steps ahead of the lesson plan. She kept me after class. "Where did you learn that?" she asked. "I read ahead," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "How far ahead?" I hesitated. "A few chapters." "How many is a few?" 14. She took off her glasses, put them back on. "Adaeze, do you want to be a doctor?" I had learned, by then, to be careful with that sentence. I had learned what happened when I said it out loud in rooms where people had already decided what I was. So I did something I hadn't done before. I told the truth and watched what happened. "Yes," I said, "more than anything." Mrs. Okonkwo didn't laugh. She opened her desk drawer and handed me a pamphlet for a summer pre-med program at a university 3 states away. Full scholarship, room and board included. Competitive application process. Deadline in 6 weeks. "I found this last year," she said, "and I was waiting for the right student. You're the right student." I stared at the pamphlet like it was written in a language I was only beginning to translate. "My parents," I started. "Don't need to know everything," she said quietly. Then, carefully, "Does that make sense?" It made complete sense. That night, I filled out the application in the stairwell on the 3rd floor under the buzzing fluorescent light, my handwriting neat and small and furious with intention. I wrote the personal essay in one sitting. I wrote about wanting to understand the body from the inside, about watching my grandmother struggle with undiagnosed hypertension for years because no one in our family had the knowledge to fight for her, about what it felt like to sit in a waiting room and not understand what the doctors were saying, and feel small and helpless, and certain that the smallness was not inevitable, that it was a gap that could be closed, and that I was going to close it. I didn't write about my father. Some truths are too large for application essays. I got in. The letter came to school because I had listed the school address. Mrs. Okonkwo handed it to me with both hands, like a ceremony. I read it twice in the hallway and then went into the bathroom and let myself cry for exactly 4 minutes, the only truly private minutes I had ever had in that building. Then I dried my face and went to calculus. I told my parents I had a summer internship through school. My mother said, "Is it paid?" My father said, "Don't expect us to cover your transportation." Emeka was home for the summer by then and said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. I went to that program with one bag and came back a different person. Not louder, not angrier, just more certain, more settled into the knowledge that the path existed, that I could walk it, and that I would walk it largely alone. There were 12 other students in that program from across the country, brilliant, hungry, overlooked students who had found each other in the way that people find each other when they've been looking for proof that they're not wrong about themselves. I still have the group photograph from that summer. 12 teenagers in a campus courtyard, squinting against July sun. I look at my face in that photo sometimes. I look so young. I look so unaware of everything that's still coming. But I also look, and this is what matters. I look like someone who knows exactly who she is. That was the summer I stopped waiting for my parents to believe in me. I decided to believe in myself loudly enough that their silence didn't have room to echo. It took 2 more years of high school, careful grades, hidden studying, and a relationship with Mrs. Okonkwo that I can only describe as quietly life-saving before I earned a full scholarship to a university with a pre-med track, full ride, merit-based, my name on an official letter with an official seal. I brought the letter home and set it on the dinner table. My father read it slowly, then he set it down and said, "Pre-med is not the same as medical school. A lot of people start and don't finish." My mother said, "Will you be far away?" Emeka said, "Good for you, Adaeze." And I think he meant it. He had grown a little by then. Distance and independence had softened his certainty about other people's limitations. I said, "I'm going." And I went. I need to be honest with you about something because I think the stories we tell about achievement often skip the worst parts. The parts where you genuinely don't know if you're going to make it. Where the dream starts to feel less like fuel and more like a weight you carry while everyone else seems to walk lighter. Pre-med nearly broke me. Not once. Twice. The first time was sophomore year, 2007. Organic chemistry. The class that famously divides the people who want to be doctors from the people who will become doctors. I had a professor, I'll call him Dr. Halstead, who had the particular talent of making students feel that confusion was a moral failure. When I went to his office hours after failing my first exam, he looked at my test paper, then at me, then back at the paper. "Have you considered a different major?" he said. I cannot describe to you the specific quality of silence that followed that question, the way my hands felt very cold suddenly, the way I became aware of every sound in the hallway outside his door. "No," I said. "The attrition rate in pre-med is quite high," he said, not unkindly. Again, that tone, that same clinical pity I'd first heard from my brother at a dinner table 4 years ago. "There's no shame in redirecting." I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about my grandmother and her blood pressure numbers she never understood. I thought about the stairwell. I thought about the photograph from that summer program, 12 kids squinting into July. "I'll see you at the next office hours," I said, and I left. I retook that exam as a makeup after 3 weeks of studying that I can only describe as obsessive. I earned a B+. I finished the course with a B. It wasn't the grade I wanted, but I finished. The second time the dream nearly took me was in 2009. My father called, rare enough that I answered on the first ring, to tell me that money was tighter than usual and that he hoped I wasn't expecting anything from them. I hadn't expected anything in years, but the call triggered something. A wave of exhaustion that wasn't about studying. I was 22 years old, working part-time in a university lab for $12 an hour, eating rice and canned beans 6 days a week, calling my mother on Sundays and listening to her not quite say what she wanted to say. I went to the campus counseling center. I sat across from a woman named Patricia, who had kind eyes and a box of tissues on the table between us, and I said, "I think I might be running on empty, and I don't know how much longer I can do this." Patricia said, "What are you running toward?" I told her about my grandmother, about wanting to understand the body from the inside, about the dinner table and my father's laugh and the stairwell light that buzzed all night. She listened to all of it, then she said, "It sounds like you've been carrying this alone for a very long time." "Yes," I said, "you don't have to." That was the turning point that nobody sees in the highlight reel. Not a scholarship letter, not an exam score, just a woman with kind eyes and a tissue box, reminding me that asking for help was not the same as admitting defeat. I kept going. I graduated with honors in 2009, applied to medical school, got waitlisted at 2 programs, rejected by 4, and accepted by 1, a state medical school 3 hours from where I grew up. I called Mrs. Okonkwo first. She cried on the phone. I had to put the phone down for a moment because I was crying too, and I didn't want her to hear me fall apart. Then I called my parents. My father said, "How long is it?" 4 years, I said. "And then you can practice?" Then residency, 3 to 7 years depending on specialty. A long pause. "That's a long time, Adaeze." "Yes," I said, "it is." He didn't say congratulations, but he didn't laugh either. And in the arithmetic of my father's approval, the absence of laughter was the closest thing to praise I had ever received. I took it. I held it up to the light, and then I went to medical school. Medical school is a specific kind of beautiful madness. I want to be clear about that. It is not glamorous. It is not the television version of itself, with its elegant diagnoses and dramatic reveals and physicians who always know exactly what to say. It is 3 a.m. in a fluorescent hallway memorizing cranial nerve pathways. It is learning to hold grief professionally, at a distance, while still caring enough to be human. It is your hands shaking the first time you draw blood and the specific stillness you have to find inside yourself before you can do it again. I loved it absolutely. By my 2nd year, I had found my people, the kind of found family that medical school produces, forged in shared suffering and mutual respect. There was Tomas, who grew up in a migrant farm worker family in California and wanted to go into internal medicine. There was Brianna, who had a laugh that could restructure a room and was going to be a surgeon whether anyone liked it or not. And there was Dr. Enid Marchetti, my academic advisor, a 61-year-old cardiologist who had graduated in 1979 from the same medical school when women were still only 12% of the class. She had been waiting, she told me once, for students who reminded her of herself. She took me under her wing in a way that was practical and unsentimental and completely transforming. "You want cardiology?" she asked me during our first meeting after reviewing my coursework. "I think so," I said. "Why?" I told her about my grandmother again, the blood pressure, the waiting rooms, the language barrier between medicine and people who needed it. Dr. Marchetti looked at me with the particular focus of someone who has been assessing people for decades and has stopped tolerating imprecision. "That's a reason to go into community medicine," she said. "Why cardiology specifically?" I had to think. "Because the heart," I said, "is where the story usually ends, and I want to be in the room where it doesn't have to." She smiled, just slightly. "Good answer. I'll come back to Dr. Marchetti. She matters to this story in a way I didn't understand until later." The years passed. 2010, 2011. Clinical rotations. The hospital at 3 a.m. The specific loneliness of being one of few Black women on certain floors in certain rooms, having to prove not just competence but right to be there, over and over, with a patience that cost something every time. The way certain attendings would look through me and address my white male colleagues, even when I was the one who had flagged the issue, caught the number, noticed the symptom. I kept going. Emeka visited once during my 3rd year. He drove 3 hours and took me to dinner at a Thai restaurant near campus. We sat across from each other like 2 people who had grown up in the same house and somehow become strangers who were trying to remember how to be siblings. "Dad talks about you more than you'd think," he said. I looked up from my menu. "He doesn't say much," Emeka clarified. "But when someone asks about the family, he mentions you." A pause. "He says you're in medical school." "That's accurate," I said. "He sounds—" Emeka stopped, seemed to choose the next word carefully. "Surprised." "He should be," I said. "He didn't think I could do it." Emeka was quiet for a moment. "I didn't either," he said. "I want you to know I know that was wrong." It was the first apology he had ever given me. It wasn't perfect. It didn't undo anything. But it was real, and I let it be real, and I thanked him for it, and we ate dinner and talked about other things. Sometimes that's how healing starts, not with grand speeches. With Thai food and someone saying, "I know I was wrong." I graduated medical school in 2013. I matched into my cardiology residency at a hospital in the same city where I'd done my medical school training. Dr. Marchetti stood in the auditorium at match day and applauded with the focused energy of someone who has been waiting for this specific moment. I called my parents after. My father answered on the second ring. "Dad," I said, "I'm going to be a cardiologist." A silence, longer than I expected. "Okay," he said. Finally. Just that. Okay. I was 30 years old, standing outside a hospital on a March afternoon in 2013, and my father had said exactly one word in response to a decade of work. I stood there for a long moment in the thin spring sunlight. Then I put my phone in my pocket and went back inside to start my life. It's strange, the way the moment you've prepared for doesn't look like you expect it to. I had imagined, in the small private theater of my own mind, that when vindication came, it would arrive with clarity, with drama, with the specific satisfaction of a door slamming open after you've been pressing against it for years. It came instead as a phone call. On a Saturday morning in April of 2016, I was in my apartment, residency behind me, fellowship finished, 2 months into my first attending position in cardiology. I was making coffee and listening to the radio and feeling, for the first time in a very long time, something that resembled peace. My mother's number on my phone. She called on birthdays and Christmas, not Saturday mornings in April. I answered. Adaeze. Her voice had a particular texture I hadn't heard in years, stripped of its composure, raw underneath. "Mama, what happened?" "It's your father." A pause that contained everything. "He had a heart attack last night. They took him to the hospital. They're saying he needs surgery. Something about the arteries around his heart, they're blocked. They used a word I didn't understand." Her voice fractured on the last sentence. I didn't understand what they were saying. I set down my coffee. I was very still. I want to tell you that what I felt in that moment was clean and simple, but it wasn't. What I felt was layered in the complicated way that everything between a parent and child is layered when the relationship has been difficult for a very long time. There was fear, genuine, immediate fear for my father's life. There was the medical knowledge clicking into place, assessing the situation with the part of my brain that had been trained for exactly this. There was grief, not for what was happening now, but for all the years of distance and disappointment and laughter at dinner tables. And underneath all of it, underneath everything, I was a cardiologist, and my father needed one. "What hospital?" I asked. She told me. "Okay," I said. "I'm on my way. Mama, listen to me. I'm going to call the hospital right now and speak to whoever is handling his case. I need you to tell them your daughter is a cardiologist and she is coming. Can you do that?" A silence. Then, "You want me to tell them you're a doctor?" "Yes." "Your father doesn't—" She stopped. "I know," I said. "Tell them anyway." I was in the car in 11 minutes. I drove the 4 hours to my parents' city the way I had once driven to exams, completely present, completely focused, no room for anything except what needed to happen next. I arrived at the hospital at 2 in the afternoon. My mother was in the waiting room, smaller than I remembered, wearing a coat that was too heavy for April. She stood up when she saw me, and I held her for a long moment, and she held me back in a way she hadn't since I was very small. "He's stable," she said. "They're waiting to see if he needs surgery or if they can manage with medication. The doctor said, the cardiologist said he'd come speak with us." "I know," I said. "I spoke with him on the way here. I'm going to go speak with him again." She looked at me, really looked at me, in a way that felt new. "You know what they're talking about?" "Yes, Mama, I know exactly what they're talking about." I walked to the nurse's station, introduced myself to the attending cardiologist, a man named Dr. Fielding who had been practicing for 20 years and was professional and thorough. And we stood in the hallway outside my father's room, and I asked him every question I would have asked on behalf of any of my own patients. I asked about the imaging, the ejection fraction, the specific vessels involved, the risk profile for surgical versus medical management. Dr. Fielding answered all of it. Then he looked at me with a particular expression. "You're his daughter?" "Yes." "He doesn't know you're a doctor," Dr. Fielding said. Not accusatory, just observational. "He's known for 13 years, I said. "He just hasn't quite believed it yet." Dr. Fielding nodded slowly. "He needs the surgery," he said. "I think you already knew that." "I did," I said, "but I wanted to hear it from you." He nodded, gave me a moment, then, "Would you like to be in the room when we speak with him?" "Yes," I said. I would. We walked into the room together. My father looked older than I remembered. He had the particular vulnerability of sick people that no amount of personal authority can fully resist. The hospital gown, the monitors, the IV line. He turned his head when we came in. He saw Dr. Fielding. And then he saw me. Something moved across his face, something I did not have a name for. "Adaeze," he said. "Hi, Dad." Dr. Fielding explained the situation, the blockages, the risk, the recommended procedure. My father listened the way he always listened, with his jaw slightly set, as if he were evaluating the speaker for credibility. Then he looked at me. "You understand all of this?" he said. "Yes." "All of it." "Yes, Dad." He was quiet for a moment. His eyes moved to Dr. Fielding and then back to me. "What do you think I should do?" he asked. My father, who had never once asked my opinion on anything significant, was asking me. I sat down in the chair beside his bed. I looked at him, at the face I had spent so many years trying to read, trying to satisfy, trying to live without the approval of, and I told him, in clear and careful language, exactly what I thought he should do. I explained the procedure, the risks, the recovery. I answered his questions. I sat with him in the room while the fear moved through him, and I did not leave. When Dr. Fielding stepped out to arrange the surgical consultation, my father and I were alone. The silence between us had a different texture than it usually did. Something had shifted, some weight redistributed. "Adaeze," he said. "Yes." He looked at the window, at the pale April light coming through it. "I didn't think—" He stopped, tried again. "I said things. When you were young. At the table." "Yes," I said. "I didn't think you'd—" "I know." He turned back to me. His eyes were wet in a way I had never seen before. My father, who had always seemed impervious, who had pressed his shirts and quoted proverbs and carried his certainty like a shield. "I was wrong," he said, very quietly. "About what you could do." 3 words more than Amika had managed. 3 words that cost him something, I could see that. 3 words that came from somewhere deep and difficult. I put my hand over his. "I know," I said. "Rest now. You have surgery in the morning." My father had his surgery in April of 2016. It went well. He spent 4 days in the hospital. I stayed for 3 of them, sleeping on a cot in the family waiting room, reviewing his charts each morning with Dr. Fielding, translating everything into language my mother could hold on to. On the 2nd day, a nurse stopped me in the hallway and said, "Are you the cardiologist, daughter? He's been telling everyone." I stood very still. "What do you mean?" "Your father," she said. "He's been telling the other patients, the staff, that his daughter is a cardiologist. He keeps saying it." She paused. "He seems proud." I thanked her, walked to the bathroom, stood over the sink for a long moment. 13 years. 13 years of silence, and I'm not sure what I expected. Not this. Not the revelation that pride can exist quietly in a person for years before it finally finds its way to the surface. Not the possibility that my father had been carrying something he didn't know how to say. I don't tell you this to excuse him. I want to be careful here because there is a version of this story where the ending erases everything that came before it, where the father's deathbed vulnerability becomes the redemption arc, and the daughter forgives everything, and we all go home feeling clean. That is not this story. The dinner table in 2003 is still real. The laughter is still real. The years I spent studying alone in stairwells and lying to my parents about where I was because I couldn't trust them with my dream. Those years are real. They made me who I am, and they cost me something. Both things are true. What I know now, a few years removed from all of it, is that forgiveness is not the same as amnesia. You can decide not to carry something without pretending it never happened. You can choose your relationship with someone going forward without rewriting the past. My father and I are not close. Even now, we have never been close. But something changed that April. Something subtle and irreversible. He calls sometimes. He asks about my work. He says, occasionally, things that would not have occurred to him to say when I was 16 years old. A few months after his surgery, he told me that a neighbor's daughter was thinking about going into medicine and he had encouraged her. I told her it was a good path, he said, that it was hard but worth it. That's good, Dad, I said. I told her I knew someone in cardiology, he said. That's good. A pause. I meant you. I know, I said. I know you did. My mother, for her part, has become someone different in the years since. The near loss of my father rearranged something in her. She calls me more often now, and the calls are different. She asks questions about my life that feel genuinely curious rather than performatively interested. She told me once on the phone late at night that she wished she had said something at that dinner table, that she had known, even then, that I was capable, that she had been afraid of my father's reaction and she had chosen the easier silence. I should have said something, she told me. Yes, I said. You should have. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, she said. I told her I accepted the apology. I meant it. Not perfectly, not without the weight of everything it contained, but I meant it. Mrs. Okonkwo came to my hospital's cardiology symposium in 2017. She was retired by then, but I had invited her, had sent the letter to her last known address, and hoped. She showed up in a blue dress with her reading glasses on their beaded chain, and she sat in the front row and listened to me present research on health equity disparities in cardiac care in underserved communities. After, she found me in the reception hall. She put both hands on my face the way older women do when they want you to really hear them. I always knew, she said. I know, I said. Did you? I thought about it. Sometimes, I said. When I'd forget, I'd think about you. She smiled, dropped her hands, picked up a glass of water. You were never going to stop, she said matter-of-factly. Some people can't. It's not a compliment exactly. It just is. I thought about that for a long time afterward. The idea that determination isn't always a choice, that sometimes something in a person simply cannot be put down, cannot be laughed away, cannot be argued into silence no matter how many dinner tables try, that there are people who will find the stairwell, who will read 14 chapters ahead, who will drive 4 hours on a Saturday morning because someone they love needs someone who knows what to do. I don't know if I was brave. I think I was just unable to stop. There is a version of this story where I end by standing over my father's hospital bed and feeling vindicated, and maybe part of me does feel that. But the feeling I carry more often, the one that has stayed, is something quieter. It's the feeling of the symposium hall, of presenting research that might change how cardiologists treat patients who look like my grandmother, who sit in waiting rooms not understanding the language medicine speaks, of knowing that the dream I announced at that dinner table has become something that reaches beyond me, that has a purpose larger than proving anyone wrong. My father laughed in 2003. He told the nurses about his daughter, the cardiologist, in 2016. I am not sure he has fully connected those two moments. I'm not sure it matters. What matters is what I know now, sitting here in the quiet of everything this has been. The people who don't believe in you are not the point. They were never the point. They were only the friction that helped you find out how hard you were willing to push. Push hard. Study in the stairwell if you have to. Find your Mrs. Okonkwo. Find your Dr. Marchetti. Find the people who see you and let them see you. The rest, the dinner tables, the laughter, the long years of silence, the rest you'll survive. And more than survive. You'll walk into the room where it matters, knowing exactly what you're doing, and that will be enough. It will be more than enough.